I always believed the cabin was the one thing that belonged to me completely, a quiet anchor in a life that had drifted off course. But when I drove up the icy pass that night, expecting silence, I found floodlights cutting through the dark and a dumpster in my driveway. My sister hadn't just broken in, she had gutted my sanctuary, standing in the freezing wind. I realized family can rob you faster than any stranger. The silence of Pine Hollow Ridge was not empty. It was heavy, composed of 1,000 distinct muffled sounds that the snow pressed down into the earth. I lived for that silence. It was the only reason I could tolerate the endless stream of notifications, the deadlines, and the performative urgency of my life as a remote project manager for Northgate Harbor Solutions. At 32 years old, I had cultivated a life of deliberate, quiet borders. I liked my coffee black, my spreadsheets balanced, and my solitude uninterrupted. My grandmother's cabin was the physical manifestation of that need for order. It sat on a shelf of granite overlooking the valley, a structure of rough-hewn pine and stone that seemed to grow directly out of the mountain. It was not a luxury property. The floors listed slightly to the west, the windows rattled when the wind came down from the peaks, and the heating system was a temperamental beast that required coaxing and patience, but it was mine. I had inherited it 18 months ago, and every paycheck I earned went into a specific high-yield savings account earmarked for a slow, respectful restoration. I did not want to gut it. I wanted to heal it. That Tuesday morning began with the kind of digital tension that makes your jaw ache before you have even brushed your teeth. I sat at the small oak table in the living room, my laptop screen glowing with the faces of my team. The connection was stable, but the atmosphere was not. "We are looking at some restructuring in Q3, my manager said. His voice was tinny through the speakers. "Nothing is finalized, Audrey. But I want you to be aware of the landscape. It would be good for you to show face at the planning retreat in Brookvale City, just to remind the higher-ups that there is a human being behind the email address. Restructuring. It was the corporate sanitized word for layoffs. I looked around the living room. The morning light was filtering through the pines, casting long, pale stripes across the floorboards. If I lost my job, I lost the cabin. It was a simple, terrifying equation. The property taxes in this part of Colorado had spiked 40% in the last 3 years, driven by the influx of tech money and second-home buyers who treated the ridge like a playground. I was holding on, but my grip was white-knuckled. "I will be there," I said, keeping my voice even. "Send me the itinerary." I closed the laptop and exhaled, a long breath that fogged slightly in the cool air of the room. I had to go. Brookvale City was a 3-hour drive south, a sprawling urban hub that felt like a different planet compared to the ridge. It would mean 2 days of hotel air, forced networking, and smiling until my face hurt. I spent the afternoon prepping the house for my absence. I checked the thermostat, set it to 55 degrees to keep the pipes from freezing, and double-checked the window latches. Before I left, I walked over to the neighbor's property. Caleb Morrow was in his driveway, splitting wood. He was a part-time EMT and full-time recluse, a man who spoke in sentences that rarely exceeded 5 words. He had lived next to my grandmother for 10 years, and they had shared a relationship based on mutual respect and zero intrusion. He had extended that courtesy to me, leaving for a few days, I said, stopping at the edge of his fence. Caleb rested the axe head on the chopping block and looked up. He wiped his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. "Work thing?" "Yeah, just have to show my face. Would you mind keeping an eye out? Just for snow buildup, or if a bear decides to try the trash bins again." He nodded once. "I will watch it." I hesitated. I did not want to be the paranoid city girl, but the anxiety about the job was bleeding into everything else. "Thanks, Caleb. I really appreciate it. I will text if anything looks off," he said. I drove away feeling a sense of unease that I could not quite place. I told myself it was just the stress of the impending retreat, the fear of having to justify my salary to a room full of strangers. I did not know then that the threat was not the snow, or the bears, or the corporate executives. The drive to Brookvale was a blur of gray highway and podcasts I was not really listening to. I checked into a generic business hotel, unpacked my blazer, and spent the next 24 hours in a windowless conference room, nodding at pie charts and using buzzwords like synergy and bandwidth. It was during the lunch break on the second day that my phone buzzed against the table. I flipped it over. It was a text from Marissa. My older sister and I had a relationship that could best be described as intermittent. Marissa was a creature of high highs and subterranean lows, a woman who moved through life leaving a wake of unfinished projects, sudden passions, and complicated debts. She was charming, undeniably so. But her charm was a finite resource, usually deployed right before she asked for something. I opened the message. I am in the area. I might stop by the cabin to check on things. Hope you are good. My stomach tightened. Marissa lived in Denver, or at least she had the last time we spoke. Pine Hollow Ridge was not on the way to anything. And Marissa did not check on things. Marissa investigated opportunities. I typed back immediately. Please do not. I am not there right now. I am in Brookvale for work. The house is locked up and winterized. I watched the screen. The status changed to seen instantly. I waited for the 3 dancing dots that would indicate a reply. I waited for a minute, then 2, then 5. Nothing. I put the phone down, trying to suppress the spike of irritation. It was fine. She had seen the message. She knew I was not there. Marissa could be pushy, but she would not drive all the way up the mountain just to sit on my porch in the cold. I went back into the conference room, but my focus was shattered. I kept checking my phone under the table. No response. No confirmation. Just that hanging silence. By 3 in the afternoon, the gut feeling had graduated from a whisper to a scream. It was a physical sensation, a cold prickle at the base of my neck. I realized I was not listening to the VP of marketing talk about quarterly goals. I was wondering if I had remembered to lock the deadbolt on the back door. I stood up. I am so sorry. I whispered to the colleague next to me. I have a family emergency. I slipped out of the room, packed my bag in 10 minutes, and was in my car before the guilt could stop me. I drove fast, faster than I should have on the winding roads that led back up into the high country. The sun began to dip behind the peaks, casting the world in a bruised purple twilight. By the time I reached the pass, it was fully dark. The temperature dropped, and the roads turned slick with patches of black ice. I gripped the wheel, rehearsing the conversation in my head. I was being ridiculous. I would arrive home. The cabin would be dark and silent, and I would feel foolish for leaving the retreat early. I would have to email my boss and apologize. I turned off the county road and onto my long gravel driveway. The tires crunched on the packed snow. Then I saw the glow. It was not the warm yellow light of my porch lamp. It was a harsh, blinding white glare that cut through the trees like a physical blow. I crested the hill and slammed on the brakes. My cabin was bathed in the artificial daylight of 2 massive portable floodlights mounted on tripods. A white van was parked aggressively close to the front steps, its engine idling, puffing gray exhaust into the clear night air. But it was the third shape that made my breath stop in my throat. A dumpster. A massive rusted metal dumpster sat in the middle of my driveway, and it was already half full. I sat in the car for 10 seconds, my hands frozen to the steering wheel. This was a mistake. I had turned into the wrong driveway. But that was my front porch. That was the uneven stone step I had been meaning to fix. I threw the car into park and got out. The wind hit me instantly, biting through my thin work blouse, but I did not feel the cold. I felt a surge of adrenaline that made my vision sharpen to a pinprick. "Hey!" I shouted. I marched toward the house. The front door, my grandmother's heavy oak door with the brass knocker, was propped open with a brick. Muddy boot prints tracked across the porch. The sound of power tools whined from inside. A high-pitched scream of a saw cutting through wood. I stepped across the threshold. The air inside was thick with white dust. It tasted like dry wall and pulverized plaster. I coughed, waving my hand in front of my face. "Stop!" I yelled. "Stop it!" I walked into the kitchen, or what used to be the kitchen. My knees almost gave out. It was gone. The heart of the cabin. The room where my grandmother had taught me to knead dough, where we had spent 1,000 winter evenings, was a ruin. The cabinetry, solid knotty pine that had been there for 50 years, had been ripped from the walls. It was stacked in a haphazard pile in the center of the room, like debris after a bombing. The vintage cast-iron sink was gone, leaving a gaping hole in the counter. Wires hung from the ceiling where the light fixtures had been yanked down, and there, on the dusty surface of the only remaining counter section, were the recipe cards, my grandmother's index cards, written in her looping, shaky cursive, the instructions for her apple cake, her venison stew, her holiday spice cookies. They were scattered like trash, coated in a layer of fine grit. One of them bent in half under a discarded wrench. I reached out and touched the bent card. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely pick it up. "Who are you?" The voice came from behind me. I spun around. A man was standing in the doorway to the dining room. He was big, wearing a heavy Carhartt jacket and a tool belt. He held a tablet in one hand and a travel mug in the other. He looked annoyed, as if I were a solicitor interrupting his dinner. "I am the owner of this house," I said. My voice sounded strange, thin and sharp. "Who are you?" He frowned, looking me up and down. He glanced at his tablet, then back at me. "You are the sister?" "I am the owner." I repeated, "What are you doing? Why is my kitchen destroyed?" "I am Darren Pike. Summit Peak Renovations. We are doing the remodel." He spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Look, we are on a tight schedule here. If you have questions about the change order, you need to talk to the project lead." "There is no project lead," I shouted. "I did not hire you. Get out of my house." Darren Pike did not move. He sighed, a sound of professional exasperation. "Ma'am, I have a signed work authorization and a deposit on file." He tapped the screen of his tablet and turned it toward me. I looked at the glowing screen. It was a digital document, a standard liability waiver and work order for a complete kitchen demolition and remodel. The total estimated cost at the bottom was $45,000. And there, at the bottom, was a signature. Audrey Wood. It was my name, and it looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the A, the same sharp slant to the W. It was not perfect, but to a stranger, it was identical. I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at the digital ink. "I did not sign this." Darren Pike shrugged. "Look, the lady who let us in said you were on board, but you were busy with work. She signed off on the rush fee." "The lady who let you in? Surprise!" The voice came from the stairs. Marissa descended like she was making an entrance at a gala. She was wearing a pristine white cashmere sweater that looked ridiculous in the dusty chaos of the room. Her hair was perfectly blown out, and she was holding a bottle of champagne. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright and manic. "Audrey, you are back early." She bounded down the last few steps and came toward me, arms open. I took a step back, my heel crunching on a piece of broken tile. "Marissa," I said. She stopped, sensing the radiation coming off me. She gave a little laugh, a nervous, bubbling sound. "Okay, I know. It looks crazy right now. It always looks worse before it gets better. That is just the process. But wait until you see the vision board. We are opening this whole wall up, putting in a farmhouse sink, maybe some quartz." "Marissa," I said again, louder. She flinched. "Audrey, listen, I am doing this for us, for the family." This place was stuck in the past. It was depressing. Gran would not want you living like a hermit in a museum. I am bringing it up to value. It is an investment. You tore out the cabinets. I whispered. You authorized a $45,000 renovation on a house you do not own. Marissa waved her hand dismissively. That is just the estimate. I have a partner, a silent partner. He is funding the capital improvements. It is not going to cost you a dime. I am handling it. I wanted it to be a surprise for when you got back. You forged my signature, I said. I pointed to Darren Pike's tablet. Marissa's smile faltered. I did not forge it. I signed on your behalf. I am your sister. It is the same thing. We had to move fast. Audrey, we had to get the demo done before the inspector came by next week. The room went quiet. Even Darren Pike shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. What inspector? I asked. Marissa blinked, as if realizing she had said a word she should not have. Just the county. You know how they are. Permits take forever. We wanted to get the bulk of the work done so they could just sign off on the finishings. It is standard. Everyone does it. She was lying. I could see it in the way her eyes darted to the left, away from mine. She was vibrating with a frantic energy that felt less like enthusiasm and more like panic. I turned back to Darren Pike. I want you to leave, now. Darren looked at Marissa. Ma'am, if we stop now, we can't secure the site. The electrical is exposed. I don't care. I said, pack up your tools. Get out. Marissa stepped forward, grabbing my arm. Audrey, stop. You are being dramatic. You are embarrassing us. Darren, keep working. She is just tired from her trip. I ripped my arm away from her. Do not touch me. I looked at the tablet again, which Darren was still holding. My eyes drifted to the top of the invoice, to the billing section. Customer, Audrey Wood, billing address, 404 Cedar Lane, Denver, Colorado. That was an apartment I had moved out of 4 years ago, an address Marissa knew, but it was the payment method that made my knees lock. Payment. Visa ending in 8892. The world tilted. That was not my current debit card. That was a credit card I had opened 5 years ago to pay for emergency dental work. I had paid it off and closed the account. Or I thought I had closed it. I had cut up the plastic. I looked at Marissa. She was watching me, her smile fixed and brittle. You opened the card, I said. The words came out flat, devoid of inflection. You reactivated the Redwood Crest account. Marissa's expression shifted from fake joy to a sudden, sharp defensiveness. I just added myself as an authorized user. It was easy. I knew all the security questions. Audrey, name of first pet, mother's maiden name. It is not a big deal. I told you. My partner's going to pay it off next month. We just needed the float for the materials deposit. You stole my identity. I said, I borrowed your credit. She snapped. God, why do you have to make everything so legal? I am trying to help you. You sit up here in the dark, hoarding this place, letting it rot. I am trying to give us a future. I looked around the room. I looked at the pile of shattered wood that used to be my grandmother's cabinets. I looked at the recipe cards covered in dust. I looked at the stranger standing in my kitchen with a crowbar. Get out, I said. Marissa laughed. A high, incredulous sound. What? Get out of my house. Both of you. Marissa's face hardened. I am not leaving. I have nowhere else to go. I gave up my apartment in Denver to come here and manage this project for you. That is not my problem. I said. Marissa crossed her arms. You can't kick me out. I established residency. I have been here for 3 days. The audacity of it took my breath away. She had broken in, destroyed my home, and was now claiming squatters' rights in the span of a single conversation. I turned to Darren Pike. If you are not off my property in 10 minutes, I am calling the sheriff, and I will tell him you are operating without a valid permit. Since my sister just admitted you are dodging the inspector, Darren Pike's face changed. The boredom vanished, replaced by self-preservation. He looked at Marissa, then at me. He signaled to the 2 other guys who were hovering in the hallway. Pack it up, he said. No, Marissa shouted. Darren, do not listen to her. I am the client. I am the owner, I yelled, my voice finally cracking. Darren ignored Marissa. He started unplugging the saw. We are leaving. We will bill for the hours worked. You 2 figure this out. I stood there, trembling, watching them pack. Marissa stood in the corner, fuming, muttering under her breath about how ungrateful I was, how I was ruining everything. When the contractors walked out the door, I followed them to lock it. I turned to Marissa. You need to leave. I said, I am not going anywhere. She hissed. It is 10 degrees outside. Audrey, are you going to kill your own sister? I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the desperation under the cashmere. I saw the way her hands were shaking, not from cold, but from something else. "You can sleep on the couch," I said, "but do not speak to me. Do not come near me. Tomorrow. You are leaving." I did not wait for her answer. I walked out the front door. I could not stay in that house. It did not feel like mine anymore. It felt violated. The air inside felt contaminated by her lies and the dust of the destruction. I walked to my car, parked behind the dumpster. I got in and locked the doors. I reclined the seat as far back as it would go and pulled my coat tight around me. I stared at the cabin. The floodlights were off now, but the lights in the living room were still on. I could see Marissa's shadow moving back and forth, pacing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A notification from my bank app. A fraud alert. Did you attempt a charge of $5,000 at Summit Peak Renovations? I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. I was 32 years old. I had a savings account. I had a credit score of 780. I had a plan. And in the span of 3 days, my sister had taken a sledgehammer to all of it. The wind picked up, rattling the heavy metal lid of the dumpster. Clang, clang, clang. It sounded like a bell tolling for a funeral. I closed my eyes, but I could not sleep. I just lay there in the freezing dark, listening to the sound of my life falling apart. The sun came up over the ridge not as a promise, but as an exposure. It hit the windshield of my SUV, turning the frost into a blinding glaze, and woke me from a shallow, shivering sleep. My neck was stiff, locked in a painful angle against the headrest, and for a split second, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the dumpster. It was still there, a rusted metal scar against the pristine white snow. The memories of the night before crashed into me. The floodlights, the sawdust, the stranger in my kitchen, my sister's manic smile. I sat up, peeling my coat off my face. The house was quiet. The front door was closed. But before I could even reach for my thermos of frozen water, a heavy diesel engine roared to life behind me. I spun around in the seat. The white van from Summit Peak Renovations was back. It had pulled in right behind my car, effectively boxing me in. Darren Pike hopped out of the driver's side, holding a clipboard and a steaming cup of gas station coffee. I scrambled out of my car, ignoring the ache in my back. The cold morning air bit through my wrinkled clothes. "What are you doing?" I shouted, marching toward him. "I told you to leave." Darren didn't look intimidated. He looked bored, efficient, and entirely unconcerned with my outrage. He took a sip of his coffee and tapped the clipboard with a thick finger. "Morning," he said. "Look, Ms. Wood, or whichever Ms. Wood you are today. I pulled the crew last night because things got heated, but I read through my contract this morning. I can't just walk off a job site that is half demoed. You do not have a contract," I said, my voice rising. "You have a fraudulent piece of paper signed by someone who does not own this property." Darren shook his head. "That is a civil dispute between you and your sister. My contract says I am liable for site safety and materials until the job is formally closed out. If I walk away now and a pipe bursts or the electrical shorts out, I get sued. I am not getting sued." "Then stop working," I said. "Just stop. I can't stop without a formal halt order signed by the client." Darren said flatly, "The client is the person who signed the quote. That is the person who paid the deposit. Unless she signs a release of liability and forfeits the scheduling deposit, I am obligated to continue the scope of work to reach a stabilization point." He was using bureaucratic logic to bulldoze me. He wasn't staying because he cared about the house. He was staying because he wanted to keep billing. "Get her out here," Darren said, gesturing to the house. "You get her to sign the release, and I walk. Until then, I have guys coming in 20 minutes to frame the island." I stared at him, my hands balled into fists in my pockets. He was holding my house hostage with paperwork. I turned and walked to the cabin. I didn't unlock the door. I pounded on it. "Marissa!" It took a full minute before the door opened. My sister stood there wrapped in a thick duvet, looking sleepy and soft, like a child who had been woken up too early. "What?" she groaned. "It is 7 in the morning." "Audrey, tell him to leave," I said, pointing at Darren. "Sign his paper and tell him to get off my property." Marissa looked past me at the contractor. She pulled the duvet tighter. "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "if I cancel the contract, we lose the deposit. That is $5,000. Audrey, we can't just throw that away. It is my money," I snapped. "You paid it with my credit card." "It is an investment," she insisted. "Look, just let them finish the framing. It will raise the appraisal value. We can talk about the rest later." She was refusing. She was actually refusing to stop the destruction of my home because she didn't want to waste the money she had stolen from me. I looked at Darren. He was watching us, checking his watch. "I am calling the police," I said. Marissa rolled her eyes. "Go ahead. Tell them your sister is fixing your kitchen. They will tell you it is a civil matter. You know they will." She was right. I knew enough about small-town law enforcement to know they hated domestic property disputes. Without a court order, they would look at the signed contract, look at the sisters arguing, and drive away. I walked past her, bumping her shoulder, and went into the living room. I needed my phone. I needed a signal. I needed sanity. I sat on the edge of the dusty sofa and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. Not the card she had used, but my primary one. I needed to get to the fraud department of Redwood Crest Financial. The hold music was a cheerful, tinny jazz loop that made me want to scream. Finally, a human voice clicked on. "Redwood Crest Security. This is Jason. How can I help you?" I took a breath, trying to steady my voice. "My name is Audrey Wood. I need to report unauthorized activity on a credit card account that I believed was closed." "One moment. Ms. Wood." I heard the clicking of keys. "Okay, I see the account. A Visa Signature Rewards card? I see it was reactivated on the 12th of last month." "Reactivated? How?" I asked. "I did not request that." The agent hummed. "It looks like it was done over the phone." The caller verified the identity using standard security protocol. "What protocol?" I demanded. How could they verify it was me? "Well, they answered the security questions on file." Jason said, "Mother's maiden name, name of your first pet," and they verified the last 4 digits of the social. I felt a cold hollowness expand in my chest. It wasn't just a hacked password or a stolen letter. It was my history. My mother's maiden name was Holloway. My first pet was a golden retriever named Buster. These were the things that made up the fabric of my childhood. The shared language of our family. Marissa knew them because she had lived them with me. She had used our shared past to rob my future. "Who authorized the address change?" I asked. "The bill is going to an old address. That was updated during the same call." Jason said, "I want to freeze the account." I said, "I want to flag every transaction in the last 30 days as fraudulent." "I can freeze it," Jason said. "But for the fraud claims, since the security questions were answered correctly, and the card was sent to a verified previous address, the investigation might take up to 90 days. We have to determine if this is true identity theft or, well, sometimes these things are familial disputes. Even the bank knew. It was a script they probably read 10 times a day." "Freeze it," I said. "Just freeze it." I hung up and looked across the room. Marissa was in the kitchenette, or the corner where the kitchenette used to be, plugging in a portable coffee maker she must have brought with her. She was humming. "How did you do it?" I asked. She didn't turn around. "Do what?" "Answer the questions. How did you sleep at night knowing you were using Mom's name to steal from me?" Marissa turned slowly. She held a mug of coffee, the steam rising around her face. "You are making this sound so ugly." "Audrey, I didn't steal. I leveraged. There is a difference. I knew the answers because I am your sister. I know you. I was helping you. You keep saying that." I said, standing up, "You keep saying you were helping, but helping implies consent. This is violation." Marissa took a sip of coffee, her eyes watching me over the rim. "You were stuck. Audrey, you were sitting in this drafty old cabin, working a job that makes you miserable, hoarding your money like you are waiting for an apocalypse. I just gave you a push. You need a push sometimes." She wasn't answering me. I realized then that she never answered the direct question. I asked how, and she answered why. I asked about theft, and she talked about love. A knock at the door broke the tension. I turned, half expecting the sheriff, but it was Caleb Morrow. He stood on the porch, holding a cardboard carrier with 2 large coffees and a grease-stained paper bag. He looked past me at the devastation in the kitchen, then at Marissa, then back to me. His expression was grim. I saw the van come back. He said, "Brought you fuel." He handed me a coffee. It was black, hot, and exactly what I needed. "Thank you." "Caleb," he stepped inside, stomping the snow off his boots. He didn't ask for permission, which was unlike him, but I was grateful for his physical presence. He was a witness. Marissa straightened up, smoothing her hair, putting on her company face. "Hi," she said, beaming. "I am Marissa, Audrey's sister. We are doing a little work on the place." Caleb didn't smile. He looked at the pile of cabinets. A little work. He walked over to the window, the one facing the driveway. He peered at the glass where a piece of paper was taped up, the permit Darren Pike had pointed to yesterday. Caleb squinted at it, then pulled his phone out and took a picture. "What is it?" I asked. Caleb turned to me. He kept his voice low. "You noticed the spelling?" "Spelling of what?" "The owner name on the permit." I walked over. The orange card looked official enough. Building permit. Teller County. But under the field for property owner, it didn't say Audrey Wood. It said Audrey Woods, missing the E. Caleb said, and an extra "es." I stared at it. It was a clumsy error, but why? "And look at the issuer," Caleb said. He tapped the bottom of the paper, usually signed by the county clerk. "This signature says D. Pike, agent." "The contractor signed the permit?" I asked. "Contractors can't issue permits," Caleb said. "They apply for them." "This looks like a copy of an application that was taped up to look like an approval." My stomach dropped. It was a fake, a prop. "You need to document this," Caleb said. He held up his phone. "I am taking photos of everything, the demo, the van, the license plate, that paper." He looked at me, his eyes serious. "Audrey, do not let them take anything away, not even the trash. Evidence." I nodded. The fog in my brain was clearing, replaced by a sharp, cold clarity. "I need to go to town," I said. I grabbed my keys. Marissa took a step forward. "Where are you going?" "To get breakfast." I lied. I didn't wait for her response. I walked out, leaving Caleb standing guard in my living room like a sentinel in flannel. The Pine Hollow Ridge Municipal Services building was a low brick structure that smelled of floor wax and stale toner. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. I stood at the counter, watching the clerk, a woman named Sharon who had been there since I was in high school, type into her computer. "I need to check the permit status for 1089 Granite Loop," I said. Sharon pushed her glasses up her nose. "Wood residence?" "Yes." She typed. She frowned. She typed again. "I am not seeing anything active." "Audrey, last permit on that parcel was for the roof repair 3 years ago." I felt a surge of validation mixed with dread. "Are you sure? There is a crew there right now. They have a paper in the window." Sharon shook her head. "If it is not in the system, it is not legal. Sometimes folks try to start work before the approval comes through. But wait," she leaned closer to the screen. "There is a rejected application." She said, "Rejected?" "Yeah. Came in 2 weeks ago, but it wasn't under your name." "Who was it under?" I asked. Sharon squinted. "It was filed under an entity, Woodland Hearth Living, LLC. The name meant nothing to me. Woodland Hearth Living. It sounded like a candle scent or a bad lifestyle blog." "Why was it rejected?" Sharon turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "Wrong parcel ID. They listed the owner as the LLC, but the deed is still in your name. You can't pull a permit for a property you don't own, unless you have a notarized agent form. They didn't have one. Can you print that?" I asked. Sharon hit a button. The printer whirred. "Woodland Hearth Living, LLC." I took the paper and walked out to my car. I sat in the parking lot, the engine idling, and pulled up the Secretary of State's business search on my phone. My fingers were cold, making it hard to type. Search. Woodland Hearth Living. One result found. Status: active/good standing. Formation date: November 12, 2025. Registered agent. Quick Corp Services, Inc. Principal address: 4400 Industrial Way, Suite B, Brookvale City. 2 months ago. The date stared at me. 2 months ago. I was planning Thanksgiving. 2 months ago. Marissa was supposedly backpacking in New Mexico. Finding herself. She hadn't been finding herself. She had been forming a shell company. The address in Brookvale City rang a bell. 4400 Industrial Way. I minimized the browser and opened my email. Searching for Marissa's old newsletters. She had run a wellness brand called Glow Garden a few years back, selling supplements that turned out to be mostly caffeine and sawdust. I found an old invoice she had forwarded me once. Glow Garden Collective HQ, 4400 Industrial Way, Suite B. It was the same mailbox. This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't her seeing my cabin and deciding to help me on a whim. She had incorporated a business entity specifically designed to sound like it belonged to my home. Woodland Hearth, 60 days ago. She had been planning to take the cabin before she even sent me that text message. I drove back up the mountain. I didn't rehearse a calm conversation this time. The rage that filled me was different now. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger of the night before. It was something colder. It was the anger of a project manager who realizes the scope of work was a lie from day one. When I walked back into the house, the sawing had stopped. Caleb was sitting on the stairs, scrolling on his phone. Marissa was in the living room, looking through paint swatches. Woodland Hearth Living, LLC. I said. Marissa froze. She didn't turn around immediately. She placed a square of slate blue cardstock on the table with deliberate care. What? She said. I know about the LLC. Marissa, I went to the county. You tried to pull a permit under a company name. You formed it 2 months ago in Brookvale. Marissa turned. Her face was pale, but her chin was high. So, you lied. I said, you said this was a surprise. You said you just decided to do this. But you have been planning to hijack this property for months. It is just for tax reasons, Marissa shouted. Her composure cracked. God, you are so literal. My partner. He insisted we wrap the project in an LLC. It protects the assets. It is smart business. Audrey, what partner? I asked. I took a step closer. You keep saying partner. Who is he? Is he the one who paid for the formation? Is he the one paying Darren? Marissa looked away. She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. You don't know him. Tell me his name. He is not dangerous, she mumbled. He is just intense. He likes things done a certain way. He wanted the liability separated from his main holdings. His name, Marissa. She stayed silent, her jaw tight. She was protecting him, or she was afraid of him. I looked at Caleb. He was watching Marissa with a look of profound distrust. I am going to see a lawyer, I said, and if you are still here when I get back, I am going to throw your clothes in the snow. I didn't wait for her to argue. I didn't want to hear another word about her vision or her investment. Evelyn Park's office was located above the bakery in town. It smelled faintly of yeast and old law books. Evelyn was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that had seen every version of small-town betrayal imaginable. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen scratching rhythmically. When I finished, she set the pen down. Okay, she said. Here's the reality. Audrey, this is messy. I know. I said, you have a few different fires burning here. Evelyn said, ticking them off on her fingers. 1. Unauthorized construction. 2. Credit card fraud. 3. Identity theft. 4. Potential title fraud if she tried to leverage the deed. Can I stop the construction? Technically. Yes, Evelyn said. It is your property. But since the contractor has a signed agreement from someone claiming to be an agent of the owner, he has a muddy claim to stay until he gets paid or released. We can file a cease and desist against Summit Peak Renovations immediately. That should spook him enough to leave. And Marissa? Evelyn sighed. That is the hard part. If you report the credit card fraud and the identity theft to the police, she is looking at felonies, serious ones. Wire fraud alone carries heavy time. I stared at the legal pad. Felonies. I pictured Marissa in a jumpsuit. I pictured my mother, who had made me promise on her deathbed to look out for Rissa. If you don't report it. Evelyn continued, her voice softer. You are effectively accepting the debt. The bank won't forgive the charges if you refuse to file a police report identifying the thief. You can't have it both ways. You can't save your credit and save your sister. I felt a wave of nausea. I have to choose? You have to decide how much you are willing to lose, Evelyn said. She leaned forward. Audrey, unauthorized work is a civil issue. Forged signatures on permits is administrative. But accessing your accounts? That is criminal. And if there is a partner involved, a third party funding this, that worries me. LLCs like the one you described are often used to mask ownership or launder liability. If this partner has a lien on the property through that LLC, you could be in a fight for the title itself. I felt a chill go through me. A lien. I want you to write the cease and desist for the contractor. I said, and I need to think about the police report. Evelyn nodded. Smart. But don't wait too long. Documentation is your shield. I left her office feeling heavier than when I arrived. The anger was still there, but it had transmuted into something sharp and dangerous. I wasn't just a sister anymore. I was a target. I went to the pharmacy and bought a plastic accordion folder. I sat in my car and took a Sharpie. I wrote cabin on the tab in block letters. I started organizing. I put the rejected permit receipt in the first slot. I put the screenshot of the LLC registration in the second. I printed out the text messages from Marissa, the checking on things lie, and filed them. I took pictures of the receipts Darren Pike had left on the counter and uploaded them to a cloud drive, then put the physical copies in the folder. My emotions were shutting down, one by one. Disbelief was gone. Humiliation was fading. What was left was the cold, mechanical hum of project management. I was going to manage this disaster. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The van was gone. Darren Pike had left for the day. I parked and walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. I hadn't checked it in 3 days. It was stuffed full of circulars and bills. I pulled out the stack and flipped through them as I walked up the drive. Electric bill, junk mail, coupon for pizza, and then a thick envelope. It was from a lending institution I didn't recognize. Apex Home Equity Solutions. It was addressed to Audrey Wood. I tore it open right there in the driveway, the wind whipping the paper. Dear Ms. Wood, congratulations. Your pre-approval for the Home Equity Line of Credit, HELOC, in the amount of $150,000 is ready for final signature. My knees went weak. $150,000. I scanned the letter. It referenced my property. It referenced my credit score. But then my eyes caught the contact information block at the bottom. Applicant phone. 303-555-0199. That wasn't my number. It was Marissa's. I stood there, the letter shaking in my hand. She hadn't just used my credit card for a kitchen remodel. She was trying to take a loan out against the equity of my house. She was trying to mortgage my inheritance. She wasn't just fixing the kitchen. She was liquidating my life. I looked up at the cabin. The lights were on. I could see Marissa moving inside, safe and warm in the house she was stealing from under my feet. I closed the folder. I put the letter inside. I wasn't going to ask her to leave anymore. I was going to make her wish she had never come. The morning sun did nothing to warm the air inside the cabin. It only illuminated the floating dust particles, turning the living room into a hazy, suffocating box. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, the folder labeled cabin tucked under my arm like a weapon. Darren Pike was back. He was standing by the temporary sawhorse table his crew had set up, drinking an energy drink and shouting instructions to a younger man who was measuring the exposed studs. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise of the drill. Darren turned, his face tightening when he saw me. He did not look like a villain. He looked like a man who was tired of being in the middle of a domestic dispute. "We are just finishing the framing," Darren said, holding up a hand. "Like we discussed. I am securing the load-bearing wall." "Stop," I said. I walked over to the sawhorse and slapped the paper I had obtained from the county clerk onto the plywood. It was the rejection notice for the permit application filed by Woodland Hearth Living, LLC. "There is no permit." "Darren," he looked at the paper, then at me. He didn't pick it up. "I told you," he said, shifting his weight. "The client said the audit was delayed. She paid the rush fee to keep us on the schedule while the paperwork cleared. The client lied to you," I said. "The application was rejected 2 weeks ago because she does not own the property. You are operating on an illegal site. If the inspector comes back, and she will, because I called her, you are looking at fines that will wipe out whatever profit you thought you were making here." Darren stared at the rejection notice. The color drained from his face, replaced by a flush of anger. He picked up the paper and read it, his lips moving slightly. "She told me she had agency," he muttered. "She said the LLC held the title." "She told you a lot of things," I said. "But right now, you are standing in a house owned by Audrey Wood, and Audrey Wood is telling you to get out." Darren looked at his crew. He looked at the half-built island, the exposed wiring, the stack of lumber in the corner. He let out a long, heavy sigh. "Okay," he said. "We are done." He turned to his guys. "Pack it up. We are walking." "Wait," I said. Darren paused, looking back at me warily. "You do not just walk away," I said. "You stabilize the site. You cap the wires. You make sure my house does not burn down because you decided to play fast and loose with the rules." Darren hesitated. "That is billable time. Take it up with the client," I said. He stared at me for a long moment, assessing the situation. Then he nodded. A sharp, angry jerk of his chin. "Cap the lines." He barked at the younger man. "Then load the van." I watched them. I stood there for an hour, arms crossed, watching them seal off the electrical hazards and sweep up the worst of the debris. When they finally hauled the last tool chest out the front door, Darren stopped on the porch. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It was a new contract. "Look," he said, his tone shifting to something almost conciliatory. "The demo is done. You are left with a shell. I can finish this for you. We sign a new agreement. Just you and me. I will cut you a deal on the labor since we are already mobilized. You don't want to live in a construction zone." I looked at the contract. It was an offer to fix the disaster he had helped create for the low price of $30,000. "I am not signing anything," I said. Darren shrugged. "Suit yourself. But good luck getting anyone else up here in the middle of winter." He walked to his van. I watched them drive away, the taillights disappearing down the gravel drive. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was hollow. I walked back into the kitchen. It looked like a ribcage, the wooden studs exposed, the insulation puffing out like pink cotton candy. My grandmother's house, which had stood for 50 years as a monument to stability, was now a broken thing. I felt a draft and turned. Marissa was standing at the bottom of the stairs. She was wearing sweatpants and a thick wool sweater, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked smaller than she had yesterday. "They left?" she asked. I nodded. "They left." Marissa walked into the room, stepping carefully over a pile of sawdust. "You sent them away." "I saved you from a felony," I said, "or another one. Anyway, they were working without a permit." Marissa sighed, a sound that was half annoyance, half exhaustion. It was a bridge permit. My partner said it would be fine. I spun on her. "Stop saying that. Stop saying partner. Who is he?" Marissa didn't answer. She walked over to the window and looked out at the empty driveway. Her shoulders slumped. "It is over." "Isn't it?" she said softly. The project." I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Marissa, you destroyed my kitchen. You stole my credit card." "Yes, the project is over." She turned to face me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She wasn't manic anymore. She just looked defeated. I didn't have a choice. "Audrey, there is always a choice," I said. You could have called me. You could have asked for help. I couldn't, she cried, her voice cracking. I couldn't ask you. You are so perfect. You have your job and your savings and your little plan. I lost everything. Audrey. Everything. I waited. I let the silence stretch until she had to fill it. Glow Garden didn't just fail. She whispered. It imploded. I got sued. The supplier in Utah. The packaging company. They all came for me. I lost the lease on the apartment in Denver 3 months ago. I have been sleeping on friends' couches. I have been living out of my car. I felt a pang of sympathy, sharp and involuntary, but I pushed it down. And the LLC? I needed a vehicle, she said. I met someone, a guy who said he could help me restart. But he said I needed assets. I needed to show I had skin in the game. So you offered him my house? I didn't offer it, Marissa insisted. I said I had access to a property. I thought if I renovated it, if I increased the value, we could refinance, take some cash out, and pay everyone back. I was going to pay you back. Audrey, I swear, I was going to give you a new kitchen and cut you in on the equity. She believed it. That was the terrifying part. She truly believed that forging my signature and demolishing my home was a noble act of sisterly love. And the credit card? I asked. I needed materials. She said, looking down, the partner. He puts up the big money, the leverage money, but I had to cover the soft costs. I remembered the old card. I thought, just for a few weeks. I looked at her. She was 35 years old, but she was operating with the logic of a teenager who had borrowed the family car without asking. You need to tell me his name, I said, the partner. Marissa shook her head rapidly. I can't. He values privacy. He is helping me. Audrey, if I expose him, he walks away. And if he walks away... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I turned away from her. I couldn't look at her anymore. I am going to town. I said, I have to meet with a lawyer. Marissa flinched. A lawyer? Audrey, don't. Please. We can fix this. We passed the point of fixing this when you signed my name. I said. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbing my coat. As I passed the living room, something caught my eye. In the corner, piled on the armchair, were items that didn't belong to me. A stack of cream-colored knitted blankets, a set of oversized, unlit candles with labels that read Serenity and Hearth, a wooden tray with a perfectly arranged display of dried flowers and a fake vintage book. I stopped. What is this? I asked. Marissa froze. Just things. I walked over and picked up one of the blankets. It still had the tag on it. Luxe Home Staging. I looked around the room with fresh eyes. The furniture had been rearranged. My grandmother's old rocking chair was positioned perfectly by the window to catch the light. There was a ring light stand folded up behind the sofa. You have been taking photos, I said. Marissa bit her lip. I was building the brand. Woodland Hearth. We needed content. Pre-launch hype. Content? I repeated. I pulled out my phone. I searched for Woodland Hearth Living on Instagram. The account popped up immediately. 500 followers. The bio read, Reclaiming Heritage. Mountain Luxury. Coming soon. I scrolled through the feed. There was my living room. There was my view of the mountains. There was a photo of Marissa, wearing a flannel shirt that looked suspiciously like one of mine, holding a mug of coffee, looking pensively out my window. The caption read, Sometimes you have to tear it all down to build your sanctuary. #renovation. #mountain life. #owner builder. I felt a violation so deep it made my skin crawl. She hadn't just stolen the physical space. She had stolen the image of it. She had broadcast the inside of my private sanctuary to strangers, packaging my memories as her own redemption arc. You invited people here? I asked, my voice trembling. Just a photographer, she said quickly, and maybe a couple of influencers for a collab. They didn't stay long. Strangers, I said. You brought strangers into my house while I was gone. You let them walk on my floors and touch my things so you could pretend you owned this place. It is marketing, Marissa cried. It is how the world works. Audrey. I dropped the blanket on the floor. Don't touch anything, I said. Do not touch a single thing until I get back. I drove to Caleb's house first. I needed to know what he had seen. He was in his garage, working on an old snowmobile. He wiped his hands on a rag when I walked in. Contractor's gone? He asked. For now. I said, Caleb, yesterday you mentioned a vehicle. He nodded. Black SUV, Escalade or a Yukon, maybe. Newer model, tinted windows. When did you see it? Twice last week, he said. And once yesterday evening, after you got back. It drove up to the fork in the road. Sat there for 10 minutes, then turned around. Did you see the driver? No, windows are too dark. But it had out-of-state plates. Nevada? I think Nevada. I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. Marissa's partner, Caleb, leaned against his workbench. You want me to park my truck at the bottom of your drive tonight? Block it off? I considered it. It was a kind offer, but I didn't want to drag Caleb into a physical confrontation with unknown men in SUVs. No, I said, but if you see it again, can you get the plate number? I will try, he said. Be careful. Audrey, this doesn't feel like just a remodel dispute anymore. It isn't. I said, Evelyn Park was waiting for me. Her office was warm, a stark contrast to the hollow cold of my cabin. I sat down and placed the folder on her desk. She defrauded me, I said. Evelyn nodded slowly. She opened the folder and looked at the rejected permit and the social media screenshots I had printed out in the car. She registered an LLC, opened a credit line, forged a renovation contract, and is attempting to secure a home equity loan. Evelyn summarized. And she is doing it under the guise of a partnership with an unknown third party. Yes. Evelyn took off her glasses. Audrey, you have to separate yourself. Now, I know. I said, no, I don't think you do. Evelyn said sharply. If this partner has put money into the project, even if it is just through Marissa, they might try to claim an equitable lien on the property. They could argue that they improved the asset and are owed reimbursement. If Marissa signed anything at all, using the cabin as collateral, you are in danger of a title cloud that could take years to clear. What do? We need to fire a warning shot so loud they can't ignore it. Evelyn said. She turned to her computer. I am drafting a formal cease and desist order to Marissa Wood and Summit Peak Renovations. We are also going to file an affidavit of identity theft with the Federal Trade Commission and submit it to Redwood Crest Financial. This formally disputes the debt and legally identifies Marissa as the perpetrator. I stared at the diploma on the wall. Identifies Marissa as the perpetrator. Will she go to jail? I asked. Evelyn stopped typing. She looked at me. That depends on the bank and the district attorney. If the amount is over $2,000, which it is a felony. But often, if the family settles the debt, or if the victim refuses to testify, the DA won't pursue it. But the affidavit? That is the nuclear option for her credit. She won't be able to borrow money for a long time. I thought about Marissa. I thought about the time she braided my hair before prom. I thought about the time she drove 4 hours to pick me up when my car broke down in college. And then I thought about the content days. I thought about the strangers in my house. I thought about the text message. I might stop by. She didn't ask. I said. She just took. Evelyn waited. Print it, I said. Evelyn worked for another hour. She produced a stack of documents. 1. A cease and desist letter, commanding Marissa Wood to vacate the premises and cease all representation of ownership. 2. A notice of non-responsibility, to be posted on the property to prevent mechanics' liens from the contractor. 3. The fraud affidavit. You have to serve her. Evelyn said, You can hire a process server. But I will do it, I said. She is in my house. Evelyn handed me the envelope. Be careful. Audrey, desperate people do desperate things when the walls close in. The drive back up the mountain was the longest of my life. The sun had gone down, and the world was reduced to the cone of my headlights on the snow. I pulled into the driveway. The cabin was dark. Panic flared in my chest. Had she left? Had she taken the copper wiring? I unlocked the front door and stepped in. Marissa? She was sitting on the floor in the living room, wrapped in the luxe staging blankets, staring at the unlit fireplace. The room was freezing. She hadn't turned the heat back up. "I am here," she said. Her voice was flat. I walked over to her. I didn't turn on the lights. The moonlight coming through the big window was enough. I handed her the envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "It is a cease and desist," I said, "and a copy of the fraud report I'm filing tomorrow morning." Marissa took the envelope. She didn't open it. She just held it in her lap. "You are evicting me?" "I am protecting myself." I said, "You have 24 hours to leave. Marissa, if you are not gone by tomorrow evening, I am calling the sheriff to have you removed for trespassing." Marissa looked up at me. Tears were streaming down her face, silent and fast. "I just wanted a reset," she whispered. "A reset?" "He offered me a reset," she said. Graham. I froze. "Who is Graham?" "Graham Sutter," she said. "The partner. He found me after the lawsuit. He said he helps entrepreneurs who have hit a wall. He said I had vision. I just lacked capital." "And what did he want in return?" I asked, kneeling down in front of her. "Collateral," she said. "He said he needed to know I was serious. He said if I could secure a property, a base of operations, he would fund the Woodland Hearth brand. He would pay off my debts. He would make it all go away." I felt a sick feeling in my stomach. "Marissa, what did you sign?" She wiped her nose with the expensive blanket. "I don't know. A lot of things. A partnership agreement. A bridge loan note." "Did you sign a deed of trust?" I asked. "Did you sign a mortgage?" "No," she said. "I told you. The title is in your name. I couldn't sign a deed. I just signed promises. I signed a promise that the LLC would hold the occupancy rights." "Occupancy rights." I stood up. "Where are the documents?" "Marissa?" She pointed to the kitchen counter. There was an old iPad there, one I recognized. It was our dad's old tablet, the one with the cracked screen that we kept around for recipes. "It is in the cloud," she said. "The family drive. I saved everything there so Graham could see the progress." I walked into the kitchen. I picked up the tablet. The battery was low, the screen dim. I unlocked it. The passcode was still my birthday. I opened the Cloud app. There was a new folder labeled WH_project. I tapped it. Inside were dozens of files. Photos of the renovation, sketches of the kitchen, and a subfolder labeled Legal. My hand hovered over the screen. I tapped it. 3 PDFs appeared. Term sheet _ executed ... PDF. Collateral _ summary ... PDF. Occupancy _ timeline ... PDF. I opened the term sheet first ... It was on a letterhead that looked professional ... Sleek. Stonefall, private capital. I scrolled past the legal jargon, past the definitions of borrower, Woodland Hearth Living, LLC, and lender, Stonefall Capital. I found the section labeled Security. The borrower grants the lender a secured interest in the leasehold improvements and occupancy rights of the property located at 1089 Granite Loop, Pine Hollow Ridge, Colorado. Leasehold improvements, that meant the kitchen, that meant the materials. But it was the next clause that made the blood stop in my veins. Default and remedy. In the event of failure to secure the home equity line of credit, HELOC, by the milestone date, the borrower agrees to convert the bridge loan into a confessed judgment, granting the lender immediate possession of the premises for the purpose of liquidation to recover the principal amount of $75,000. $75,000. Marissa hadn't just borrowed money for cabinets. She had borrowed $75,000 from a predatory lender, promising that she would pay it back with a home equity loan she couldn't legally get. And the milestone date? I looked at the date at the bottom of the page. February 5th, 2026. I looked at the date on the top of the tablet screen. It was January 26th. 10 days. We had 10 days before this Graham Sutter, could legally try to seize possession of my house to recover a debt I didn't know existed. I looked up from the screen. Marissa was watching me from the living room floor, a dark shape in the moonlight. "You didn't just borrow money," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You sold the keys to the front door." Marissa put her head in her hands. I looked out the kitchen window. The darkness of the woods seemed to press against the glass. Somewhere out there, on the road, a black SUV was idling. He wasn't waiting for the renovation to be finished. He was waiting for the clock to run out. The screen of the tablet was the only source of light in the kitchen, casting a sickly blue glow over the dust-covered counters. I sat there for hours, long after Marissa had retreated into the living room to sob into her cashmere blankets. I was not crying. I was researching. Stonefall Private Capital was not a bank. It was not a credit union. It was a ghost. I spent the pre-dawn hours peeling back the layers of the internet, searching for the entity that now claimed a secured interest in my home. Their website was a single landing page, a logo that looked like a stylized mountain peak, a login portal for investors, and a generic contact email. There were no photos of the team, no address listed in the footer, no mission statement about community or growth. I moved to the state business registry. Stonefall was registered in Delaware, a classic move for opacity. But the deeper I dug, cross-referencing the registered agent address, the more tangled the web became. Stonefall was owned by another entity called SFC Holdings, which was connected to a property management firm in Nevada. It was a shell game, a Russian nesting doll of liability protection designed to make it impossible to find a human being to sue. By the time the sun came up, turning the gray sky to a bruised purple, I had a list of 3 names associated with the filings, none of them Graham Sutter. I called Evelyn Park's office the second the clock struck 8. "Audrey," Evelyn said, her voice crisp and awake. "I was just reviewing the fraud affidavit. I found the term sheet," I said. I was staring at the tablet, my eyes burning. Marissa signed a confession of judgment. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a long, heavy silence that scared me more than any legal jargon could. "Read it to me," Evelyn said. Her tone had shifted from advisory to urgent. I read the clause. In the event of failure to secure the home equity line of credit by the milestone date, the borrower agrees to convert the bridge loan into a confessed judgment. "Audrey, listen to me," Evelyn said. "This is not a standard lending agreement. This is a predatory trap. A confession of judgment means she effectively waived her right to a trial. She agreed that if she misses the deadline, they win. They don't have to sue her. They don't have to prove she defaulted. They just take the paper to the clerk, get a judgment, and move to seize the asset. But she doesn't own the asset." I said, "I do. That is your only shield," Evelyn said. "But it is a cracked shield. If they file that judgment, it clouds the title immediately. You won't be able to sell, refinance, or maybe even insure the property until it is cleared. And if they argue that Marissa had apparent authority, because she was living there, because she had the keys, because she was your sister, they could tie you up in court for 2 years while they bleed you dry with legal fees." I felt the blood rushing in my ears. "They want the cabin. They don't want the cabin for a vacation home," Evelyn said. "They want the equity. They want to force a sale or a settlement where you pay them off to go away. This is a shakedown. Audrey, it is sophisticated, but it is a shakedown." "Who is Graham Sutter?" I asked. "Marissa says he is the partner. I am making calls," Evelyn said. "But people like this usually operate on the fringe. They find people in distress, people like your sister, and offer them a lifeline that is actually a noose." I hung up the phone and walked into the living room. Marissa was asleep on the floor, curled up in a fetal position. She looked wrecked. Her expensive haircut was matted, her face puffy. Part of me wanted to cover her with a blanket. The other part of me, the part that was currently calculating the legal fees of a title defense, wanted to shake her until her teeth rattled. I chose something in between. I walked over and opened the curtains, letting the harsh, blinding winter sun flood the room. Marissa groaned and shielded her eyes. "Wake up," I said. She sat up slowly, blinking. Audrey, we are going to talk, I said, and you are going to tell me the truth. Not the sister version, not the victim version, the truth. I sat in the armchair opposite her. I held the tablet in my lap. Who is Graham Sutter? Marissa pulled her knees to her chest. I told you, he is an investor. No, I said. I looked up Stonefall. They are not investors. They are liquidators. How did you meet him? Marissa picked at the hem of her sweatpants. It was after Glow Garden collapsed. I was at a networking mixer in Denver, trying to find angel investors for a pivot. I was desperate. Audrey, I had creditors calling me 10 times a day, and he approached you? He bought me a drink, Marissa said. He seemed different. He didn't care about the pitch deck. He asked me about my life. He asked me what was stopping me from being great. I told him I was drowning in debt. I told him I needed a clean slate, and he offered you one. He said he specialized in distressed assets and turnaround stories. Marissa said, he said he could wrap my debts into a new venture. He called it a capitalization vehicle. He said if I could bring a tangible asset to the table, something real estate-based, he could leverage it to pay off the old loans and seed the new company. So you offered him my house. I told him my grandmother left us a cabin. Marissa cried. Us, Audrey. I know the deed is in your name. But she meant it for both of us. Graham said that was enough. He said we could structure it as a lease-to-own model for the LLC. He said you would never even have to know until the renovation was done and the value had doubled. He made it sound so simple. I stared at her. It was breathtaking. Really, the mix of entitlement and naivety. She had let a stranger talk her into stealing my home because he used words like capitalization vehicle. Did he tell you to forge my signature? I asked. He said. Marissa hesitated. He said, administrative hurdles kill momentum. He gave me a practice sheet. He said if I was acting in your best interest, it wasn't really forgery, it was proxy execution. Proxy execution. It was a nonsense term invented to make a felony sound like corporate strategy. Marissa, I said, keeping my voice low. The term sheet says if you don't get the home equity loan by February 5th, they take the house. Did you know that? Marissa went pale. No. He said that was just boilerplate. He said the deadline was flexible. There is nothing flexible about a confessed judgment. I said, you signed a death warrant for this property. I didn't mean to, she sobbed. I just wanted to fix it. I stood up. I couldn't listen to her anymore. The sound of her crying, which used to trigger an automatic instinct to comfort her, now just sounded like noise. I walked into the kitchen and picked up my phone. I needed to call the bank again. Evelyn had said something about the HELOC, the home equity line of credit. If Stonefall was pushing for that, they needed me to sign it, or they needed someone who could pass as me. I dialed Redwood Crest Financial. Fraud department, please, I said when the automated voice answered. I waited on hold for 10 minutes. My jaw was aching, a dull throb that radiated up to my temple. Ms. Wood? It was a different agent this time. A woman named Sarah. I see the freeze on your account. Has there been any activity? I asked. Since yesterday? Let me check. Sarah said, I heard the clicking of keys. Yes, she said. There was an inquiry on the HELOC application this morning. At 8:30, my stomach dropped. That was an hour ago. Who called? It wasn't a call. Sarah said, it was an upload. Someone accessed the secure document portal and attempted to upload a notary verification form. From where? I can't see the exact location, Sarah said, but the IP address traces to the Brookvale area. Brookvale, where Stonefall had a registered mailbox, where Marissa had met Graham. Reject it, I said. Flag it. That was not me. It has been flagged. Sarah assured me. The application is on hold. But Ms. Wood? Whoever did this had your login credentials for the portal. They didn't just guess. They logged in. I hung up. I looked at the tablet on the counter. I looked at Marissa's phone, which was sitting on the coffee table. Graham Sutter wasn't just waiting for Marissa to deliver. He was actively working the file. He had my credentials, probably harvested from Marissa's devices or shared by her in a moment of administrative efficiency, I needed to secure the perimeter. Not just the digital one, but the physical one. I walked back to the living room. "Give me your phone," I said to Marissa. "What?" "Give it to me. And your laptop. And the passwords to every account you have shared with him." Marissa clutched her phone. "Audrey, I can't. He texts me. If I don't reply, he gets suspicious." "Good," I said. "I want him suspicious. Give me the phone." She handed it over, her hands shaking. I walked to the front door and locked it. Then I called Caleb. He answered on the first ring. "You okay?" "No," I said. "I need to change the locks. Today, and I need cameras." "I have a spare deadbolt set in the shop," Caleb said. "And a couple of trail cams. I can be there in 10 minutes. Thank you." "Audrey," Caleb said, his voice dropping, "if this guy is as bad as you think, maybe you shouldn't be staying there alone. Marissa is not a deterrent. You can crash in my guest room. It is warm. It is safe." I looked around the cabin. I looked at the demolished kitchen. I looked at the spot on the floor where my grandmother used to do her crosswords. "I can't," I said. "If I leave, they win. Possession is 9/10 of the law, right? If I leave, Stonefall might decide the property is abandoned. I will bring the drill." Caleb said, "The next 2 hours were a blur of mechanical noise." Caleb worked with an efficiency that was calming to watch. He replaced the locks on the front and back doors with heavy-duty deadbolts. He installed a reinforcement plate on the door jambs. While he worked, I set up the cameras. I put one facing the driveway, hidden in the birdhouse my grandmother had nailed to the pine tree. I put another one inside the living room window. Facing out, I connected them to my own secure cloud account, not the family one. Marissa watched us from the sofa. She didn't offer to help. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. When Caleb finished, he handed me a set of shiny brass keys. "Only 2 copies," he said. "One for you, one for me." "If that is okay?" I nodded. "Keep it." He looked at Marissa, then at me. "You have a plan?" "I am working on it," I said. Caleb put a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. "The black SUV hasn't been back today, but I am watching." After he left, the house felt tighter, sealed, but the feeling of safety was an illusion. I knew that locks only kept out honest people, and Graham Sutter was not an honest person. I needed to know more about the permit. The emergency repair permit Sharon the clerk had mentioned. I drove down to the municipal building again, leaving Marissa locked inside the cabin with strict instructions not to open the door for anyone, not even the Pope. And certainly not Graham. Sharon was at her desk, eating a yogurt. She looked up when I walked in. "You are back," she said. "I need to see the emergency permit application." I said, "The one you told me about." Sharon wiped her mouth and clicked her mouse. "Right, the one filed yesterday afternoon." "Yesterday afternoon?" "After I had kicked Darren Pike out." Sharon printed the document. "Here, it came in via email." I took the paper. It was a standard form for emergency stabilization, citing exposed electrical and structural instability. It was signed by Darren Pike, but I looked at the email header at the top of the printout. From dpike@consulting@stonefallcap.com. My breath hitched. Darren Pike wasn't just a local contractor Marissa had hired. He had an email address on the Stonefall domain. He was an employee, or a subsidiary. They were all in on it. The contractor, the lender, the partner. It was a vertically integrated scam. "Sharon," I said, "this signature is dated yesterday, after I fired him." Sharon frowned. "Well, that is irregular. But Audrey, if there is exposed electrical—" "There is," I said, but I capped it. Sharon looked uncomfortable. "Look, when an emergency permit comes in, we have to send the inspector out. It is liability. Rita is scheduled to head up there this afternoon. Rita Hensley, the county inspector." I felt a surge of hope. An inspector would see the fraud. An inspector would see that I was the victim. "Good," I said. "I will meet her there." I drove back to the cabin, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. I would show Rita the fake permit. I would show her the unauthorized demolition. I would have the county on my side. I was wrong. Rita Hensley arrived at 2 o'clock. She drove a white county truck and carried herself with the weary authority of a woman who spent her life arguing with people about septic tanks. She didn't knock. She walked right onto the porch and began taking photos of the debris pile I hadn't had a chance to clear yet. I walked out to meet her. "Hi, I am Audrey Wood. I am the owner." Rita didn't smile. She lowered her camera. "Ms. Wood, I have a report of an unsafe work site and unpermitted structural alterations." "Yes," I said. "That is what I wanted to talk to you about. My sister hired a contractor without my permission. They gutted the kitchen. I stopped them as soon as I found out." Rita walked past me into the house. She stepped into the kitchen area. She looked at the exposed studs. She looked at the wires that Darren's crew had capped with bright orange nuts. She pulled out a tablet. "Did you pull a permit for the demolition?" she asked. "No." I said, "I didn't know it was happening." "Ignorance of the code isn't an exemption," Rita said. She tapped the screen. "You have load-bearing members exposed. You have plumbing lines that are not capped correctly. This is a code violation." I stared at her. "I understand that. But I am the victim here. Someone broke into my house and did this." Rita looked at me over her glasses. "Ms. Wood, the county does not get involved in who hired who. We care about safety. Right now. This structure is uninhabitable." "Uninhabitable?" "I am issuing a notice of non-compliance," Rita said. She typed something and a small printer on her belt buzzed. "You have 7 days to stabilize the site and pull a retroactive permit for the demolition. You also need a licensed structural engineer to sign off on the framing before you can cover this up." "But I didn't do this," I protested. "The deed is in your name," Rita said. "The violation is attached to the deed." She ripped the paper off her printer and handed it to me. "If the work isn't permitted and inspected within 30 days, the fines start at $500 a day." She turned and walked out. I stood in the wreckage of my kitchen, holding the thermal paper strip. The system wasn't designed to protect me from fraud. It was designed to punish the person holding the bag. And thanks to Marissa, I was holding a very heavy bag. I walked to the window and watched Rita drive away. My jaw was clenched so hard I could feel the muscles spasm. A sharp, electric pain shot down my neck. I closed my eyes and breathed. In, out. Stress was a physical weight. It was the tightness in my chest, the shallow sleep, the adrenaline that tasted like metal in my mouth. But underneath the physical breakdown, my mind was sharpening. It was the same part of me that managed multi-million-dollar software rollouts. Problem: the house is compromised. Constraint: I have no money to fix it and a lien threatening to take it. Asset: I have the truth. And I have the documents. I went to the table and picked up my phone. I called Evelyn. "We need to talk about the police report." I said, "Can you come to the office?" Evelyn asked. "No," I said. "I am not leaving the house. I can't risk it. I will come to you," Evelyn said. She arrived an hour later. She didn't look at the kitchen. She looked at me. "You look like hell." "Audrey, I feel like hell." We sat at the small dining table. Marissa was in her room, the guest room, with the door shut. Evelyn laid it out. "If you file the report for identity theft, the police will come here. They will question Marissa. They might arrest her on the spot, given the amount of money involved." I looked at the closed door. I imagined Marissa in handcuffs. I imagined the phone call to our aunt in Florida. "And if I don't?" "If you don't," Evelyn said, "Stonefall has a lane. They can argue that because you didn't report it. You ratified the action. They can say you were a partner in the renovation, and you are only crying fraud now because you got cold feet. It muddies the water. A police report draws a hard line. It says, 'This was a crime, and I am the victim.'" I rubbed my temples. Why does the law make me destroy my family to save my house? Because the law deals in facts, not feelings, Evelyn said gently. "And the fact is, your sister committed a crime." I looked at the notice of non-compliance on the table. $500 a day. I need a day. I said, "I need 24 hours to see if I can find another way to leverage them." "Leverage who?" Evelyn asked. Stonefall? Yes. They want the cabin, but they want it clean. They don't want a protracted legal battle any more than I do. Audrey, Evelyn warned, do not try to negotiate with these people. They are sharks. I am not going to negotiate. I said, I am going to gather intel. Evelyn left, looking worried. She told me she would have the police report drafted and ready for my signature by tomorrow morning. Night fell heavy and fast. The wind picked up, howling around the eaves of the cabin. The temperature dropped to single digits. I made tea on a hot plate I had found in the closet. I sat in the dark living room, watching the feed from the new cameras on my phone. The driveway was empty. The snow was blue-white in the moonlight. My laptop pinged. I jumped. It was the sound of a new email. I opened the laptop. The email was from a generic Gmail address. G. Sutter, consult@gmail.com. Subject, a path forward. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. Audrey, I understand there has been some confusion regarding the project at Granite Loop. Marissa is a passionate woman, but perhaps not the best communicator. We are business people. We deal in realities. The reality is that the property is currently distressed, non-compliant with county codes, and burdened by unauthorized construction debt. I imagine this is stressful for you. It doesn't have to be. We have a vision for the property that maximizes its value for everyone. I have attached a rendering of what we can achieve together. We are willing to bring you in as a silent equity partner if you sign the updated authorization. We handle the debt. We handle the inspectors. You simply collect a check. Let's talk like adults. Graham. There was an attachment. Granite Loop _concept ... JPG ... I clicked it ... The image filled the screen ... It was a 3D rendering of my cabin ... But it wasn't my cabin ... The rough-hewn pine was gone, replaced by sleek, dark siding. The front porch was expanded into a massive entertainment deck with a hot tub. The windows were floor-to-ceiling glass, and there was a sign out front. The Summit at Pine Hollow. A luxury short-stay experience. It was beautiful. It was soulless. It was a hotel. He wasn't just stealing the house. He was stealing the memory of it. He wanted to turn my grandmother's refuge into an Airbnb for tourists who wanted to pretend they were rugged. I stared at the image. The fear I had felt earlier, the shaking hands, the tight jaw, began to recede. It was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He thought I was desperate. He thought I was risk-averse, as he had told Marissa. He thought he could dazzle me with a render and a promise of a check. He didn't know I was a project manager. He didn't know that when a project goes off the rails, you don't just patch it, you audit the root cause, and you eliminate it. I hit reply. I didn't write a long email. I didn't threaten him. I typed 6 words. I am ready to meet. When? I sent it. Then I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark driveway. Come and get it. Graham. The Juniper Slate Cafe was the kind of place that had not existed in Pine Hollow Ridge 5 years ago. It had subway tile walls, Edison bulbs hanging from exposed cords, and sold lattes that cost $7. It was a physical outpost of the gentrification that was slowly creeping up the mountain. The exact demographic Graham Sutter was trying to sell my cabin to. I sat at a corner table with Evelyn Park. The table was small, wobbling slightly on the uneven floorboards. Evelyn had her leather briefcase open, a notepad aligned perfectly with the edge of the table. She looked formidable in a navy blazer, her silver hair catching the light from the window. He is 5 minutes late, Evelyn said, checking her watch. It is a power move. I know, I said. I was gripping my coffee cup so hard my knuckles were white. I forced myself to let go, to place my hands flat on the table. I am not going to let him rattle me. Just remember, Evelyn said, lowering her voice, you are the owner. He is a trespasser with a briefcase. Do not agree to anything. Do not sign anything. Let me do the talking. The bell above the door jingled. Graham Sutter walked in. He was not what I expected. In my head, I had built him up into a monster, a shadowy figure in a trench coat. In reality, he looked like a catalog model for high-end outdoor gear. He was tall, maybe 40 years old, wearing a quilted vest over a cashmere sweater and dark denim. He had the kind of tan you get from skiing in Aspen, not from working in a field. He looked healthy, wealthy, and entirely at ease. He scanned the room, spotted us, and smiled. It was a warm, practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Audrey," he said, approaching the table. He extended a hand. "I am so glad we could finally connect." I didn't take his hand. I just looked at him. "Mr. Sutter," Evelyn said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Please." Graham didn't flinch at the snub. He withdrew his hand smoothly and sat down, unbuttoning his vest. He looked at Evelyn, then back at me. "And you brought counsel," he said, his tone light. "That is very prudent. I always say, clarity is the foundation of good business. I am not here for business," I said. "I am here to find out why your company is claiming a secured interest in my home." Graham chuckled softly. He signaled the waitress and ordered a black coffee without looking at the menu. "Audrey," he said, leaning forward. "Can I call you Audrey? We are practically family. Given how much Marissa talks about you, you are not family." I said, "You are a predator who tricked my sister into signing a confession of judgment." Graham's expression shifted. It settled into a look of patient disappointment. "Predator is a harsh word. Audrey, I think a better word is accelerator." Marissa came to me in a very difficult position. She had vision. She is a true visionary. Your sister. But she lacked the infrastructure to execute. She was drowning in debt from her previous venture. I offered her a lifeline. You offered her a rope. Evelyn cut in. You structured a bridge loan with a maturity date of less than 30 days. Knowing she had no title to the collateral, that is fraud. Mr. Sutter, Graham turned his gaze to Evelyn. It is not fraud if the intent is performance. We fully expect the project to succeed. The loan was designed to be refinanced by a traditional institution once the asset was improved. We are not trying to take the house, Ms. Park. We are trying to create value. He turned back to me. "See, Audrey, here is the problem. You are risk-averse. Marissa told me you are a project manager. You like spreadsheets. You like safety. That is fine. The world needs people who color inside the lines. But Marissa? She sees what this property could be. A luxury asset. A revenue generator. We are just trying to help you realize that potential. You destroyed my kitchen." I said. "You gutted my grandmother's house without a permit. We started the demolition to stay on schedule." Graham corrected. "In development. Speed is everything. If you wait for the county to stamp every piece of paper, you miss the season. We were solving a problem for you. You forged my signature." I said, "The cafe was noisy. The hiss of the espresso machine, the chatter of tourists. But at our table, the air felt vacuum-sealed." Graham took a sip of the coffee the waitress had just placed in front of him. He didn't blink. "We utilized a proxy signature to facilitate the workflow." He said, "It is a common practice in fast-paced equity deals. Marissa assured us she had your verbal consent. We were simply prioritizing administrative efficiency." Evelyn made a sound that was half laugh, half scoff. "Administrative efficiency? You are admitting to uttering a forged instrument. Mr. Sutter, that is a Class 5 felony in Colorado." Graham's smile faded. The warmth vanished, leaving something cold and hard underneath. "Let's not throw around legal terms unless we are in a courtroom," he said. His voice was quieter now, devoid of the sales pitch. "Here is the reality. Audrey, there is $75,000 of capital deployed in that property. Materials, labor, architectural fees, that money is real. The contract Marissa signed is real. Marissa doesn't own the house," I said. "Her signature is worthless." Graham leaned back. "Is it? She has lived there. She has keys. She has access to your banking information, which suggests a high level of familial integration. In a civil suit, I could make a very strong case for apparent authority. I could tie that property up in litigation for 2 years. Can you afford legal fees for 2 years? Audrey? Can you afford to leave that house standing open to the elements while we depose every member of your family? He was threatening me. He was doing it calmly, over coffee, but he was telling me he would bleed me dry. What do you want? I asked. I want to finish the project. Graham said. He slid a folder across the table. Sign the authorization. Become the partner. We finish the renovation. We refinance the debt into a HELOC under your name, which, by the way, we have already pre-qualified you for, and we turn that cabin into a gold mine. You get a new kitchen. Marissa gets her debts paid, and I get my principal back plus interest. Everyone wins. And if I don't? Graham shrugged. Then we have to go the hard way. We file the judgment. We place a lien. We foreclose on the leasehold interest. It gets messy. It gets public. And frankly, it is a waste of everyone's time. Evelyn placed her hand on the folder. She didn't open it. She slid it back across the table. My client will not be signing anything. Evelyn said, and let me be clear. Mr. Sutter, we are filing a police report for identity theft and credit card fraud. We are filing a fraud affidavit with the lender. If you attempt to perfect any lien on that property, we will move for an immediate injunction. Graham looked at the folder, then at Evelyn. You are making a mistake, he said. We are documenting a crime. Evelyn replied. Graham stood up. He buttoned his vest. He looked at me one last time, and for a second, I saw pure contempt in his eyes. You think you are protecting her, he said, but you are just drowning her. Marissa is not built for the real world. Audrey, I was the only thing keeping the wolves away. If you cut me out, you are throwing her to the pack. He dropped a $20 bill on the table. Think about it, he said. You have until the 5th. He walked out. I sat there, staring at the $20 bill. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was rage. He admitted it. I whispered. He admitted the forgery. He called it efficiency, Evelyn said grimly. She was writing furiously in her notebook. He is dangerous. Audrey, he is used to bullying people who don't know the law, but he made a mistake. What mistake? He admitted knowledge. She said, by saying, Marissa assured us, he acknowledged he knew you weren't the one signing. That pierces his plausible deniability. But he is right about one thing. He can make this expensive. I drank my cold coffee. I don't care about the expense. I said, I want him gone. I drove back to the cabin with the radio off. The silence allowed Graham's voice to loop in my head. Administrative efficiency, apparent authority, throwing her to the pack. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a white truck parked near the dumpster. It was Rita Hensley, the county inspector. My heart sank. Had she come to issue the fine? I parked and walked over. Rita was standing by the front porch, looking at her tablet with a confused expression. Ms. Wood, she said when she saw me. Hi, Rita. I am working on the stabilization. I have a contractor coming tomorrow to quote the bracing. Rita shook her head. That is not why I'm here. I got a request for a final inspection. What? A final inspection? Rita repeated. For the kitchen remodel. The request came in through the online portal this morning. It said the work was complete and ready for occupancy sign-off. I looked at the house. The kitchen was still a gutted shell. There was no drywall. There were no cabinets. That is impossible, I said. You can see it is not done. I know, Rita said. She sounded annoyed. That is why I'm confused. Why would you schedule a final when you haven't even pulled the rough-in permit? I didn't schedule it. I said. Rita paused. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Someone scheduled it. She said, they uploaded a certificate of completion signed by the contractor. Darren Pike? Rita nodded. And a photo of a finished kitchen. She turned the tablet around. I stared at the screen. It was a photo of a beautiful, modern kitchen, rustic beams, quartz counters, high-end appliances. It was the rendering. They submitted a rendering as proof of completion. I said, my voice rising in disbelief. They are trying to trick the system. Rita frowned. She zoomed in on the photo. This is digital. This isn't a photograph. They are trying to create a paper trail. I said. I realized Graham's strategy. He didn't need the house to be finished physically. He needed the paperwork to say it was finished so he could trigger the financing or the lien. He was trying to speed-run the bureaucracy. Rita, this is fraud. I said, this whole thing is a scam. That is why I called you yesterday. Rita lowered the tablet. Her face hardened. I am flagging the parcel, she said. I am putting a lock on the permit file. No more online submissions. If anyone wants to file a document for this address, they have to do it in person, with ID, in front of me. Thank you, I said. And Audrey, Rita added, you need to get this site stabilized. I am serious. If this legal mess drags on, the county isn't going to wait. We will condemn the structure if it sits open like this. I watched her drive away. I was fighting a war on two fronts, one against Graham, and one against the slow, crushing weight of municipal code. I went inside. Marissa was in the living room, reading a book, or pretending to. She hadn't turned the page in the 10 minutes since I walked in. How was the meeting? She asked, her voice small. I didn't answer her. I couldn't look at her yet. I walked to the kitchen counter and opened my laptop. I pulled up the camera feed. I wanted to see who had come to the house while I was gone. I scrubbed the timeline back. 10:15 a.m. Rita arrives. 10:30 a.m. Rita leaves. I scrubbed back further. To last night. I hadn't checked the footage from the overnight hours. 2 a.m. The screen was black, save for the infrared illumination of the driveway. Then, headlights. A vehicle pulled up to the bottom of the drive. It didn't come all the way up. It stopped just at the edge of the property line. It was a large SUV, black, the same one Caleb had seen. A man got out. He was wearing a dark coat and a baseball cap pulled low. He walked up the driveway, the snow crunching under his boots. He moved with a purpose. He wasn't sneaking. He was marching. He walked right up to the front porch. He stopped in front of the door. He looked directly at the camera. I froze the frame. The resolution was grainy, but the face was visible. It wasn't Graham. It was a younger man, heavy set, with a thick beard. He stared into the lens for a full 5 seconds. It was a challenge. I see you seeing me. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. He bent down and wedged it under the welcome mat. Then he turned and walked away. I slammed the laptop shut and ran to the front door. I threw open the deadbolt and opened the door. The cold air hit me. I looked down. The mat was frozen to the porch deck. I kicked it up. There was the envelope. It was thick, brown, and heavy. I picked it up and brought it inside. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. I tore it open. Notice of intent to file lien. It wasn't from Stonefall. It was from Cedarline Document Services. I scanned the document. 2. Woodland Hearth Living, LLC, and Audrey Wood, owner of record. Re. Unpaid services for project management and consulting. Claimant. Stonefall Private Capital. Amount due. $75,000. Please take notice that the claimant intends to file a mechanic's lien against the property located at 1089 Granite Loop within 10 days of this notice. Pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes. Mechanic's lien. Evelyn had warned me. They were pivoting. If they couldn't get the equity loan, they would claim they were a contractor who hadn't been paid. They were claiming the $75,000 wasn't a loan anymore. It was a fee for consulting services. And because a mechanic's lien attaches to the property, not just the person, it didn't matter that Marissa didn't own the house. If labor was performed on my land was liable. I looked at the date on the notice. It was backdated 3 days. They were accelerating. Graham realized I wasn't going to sign, so he was moving to the nuclear option. I looked up. Marissa was standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She saw the paper in my hand. Is that from him? She asked. I held up the notice. He is filing a lien. Marissa, he is going to put a cloud on the title. He is claiming I owe him $75,000 for the privilege of having my house destroyed. Marissa's face crumpled. I can fix it, she said. I can call him. He listens to me. He doesn't listen to you, I shouted. The sound of my own voice startled me. It was raw, guttural. He uses you. You are not a partner. Marissa, you are a puppet. He needed someone stupid enough to sign the papers, and you raised your hand. Marissa flinched as if I had slapped her. I am not stupid. I was trying to build something. You were trying to steal, I said. I walked toward her. The anger that had been cold and sharp was suddenly hot and overwhelming. I have a question for you, I said, and I want an answer. Marissa backed up until she hit the wall. Audrey, please, did you ever see me as a person? I asked. She blinked, tears spilling over. What? In all of this? I said, when you were forging my signature, when you were bringing strangers into my living room, when you were handing over my social security number to a con artist, did you ever stop and think about me? Not Audrey the bank account, not Audrey the safety net, me, your sister. Did you ever think about what this would do to my life? Or was I just a resource to you? Was I just a backup plan for when your delusions fell apart? Marissa opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked desperate, searching for the right words, the magic combination of syllables that would make me understand. I knew you could handle it, she said softly. I stared at her. You are the strong one, she continued, her voice gaining a little strength. You always figure it out. Mom always said. Audrey will be fine. I needed it to be my turn. Audrey, I needed to win. And I knew if it went wrong, you would fix it. You always fix it. There it was, the naked, ugly truth. She didn't steal from me because she hated me. She stole from me because she didn't respect me enough to fear the consequences. She viewed my stability not as my achievement, but as her insurance policy. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't a snap. It was a quiet, final severance. I nodded. Okay. I walked to the table. I picked up my phone. I dialed Evelyn. File it. I said, Audrey? Evelyn's voice was cautious. File what? The police report, I said, and the fraud affidavit, and the request for the emergency injunction. File all of it. Are you sure? Evelyn asked. Once we file the police report, the district attorney takes over. I can't stop it. I looked at Marissa. She was watching me, her eyes wide with horror. She heard me. She knew what I was doing. I am sure. I said, my sister doesn't live here anymore. I hung up. I looked at Marissa. You need to go. I said, Audrey. No, she whimpered. Where will I go? I have no money. I have no car. I don't know. I said, and for the first time in my life, that is not my problem. You have 20 minutes to pack your things. If you are not out the door, I am letting the deputies arrest you here. And I don't want them to do that. Marissa stared at me. She waited for the punchline. She waited for me to sigh and say, fine, stay one more night. I didn't say it. I turned my back on her and started typing an email to the sheriff's department, attaching the camera footage of the man with the envelope. I heard her move. I heard the soft footsteps on the stairs. I heard the sound of a zipper. 20 minutes later, Marissa walked down the stairs. She was wearing her coat and carrying a large duffel bag. She looked like a refugee from a luxury catalog. She stopped at the door. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't look up from my laptop. She opened the door. The wind howled, blowing snow into the hallway. She paused. I left something for you, she said. In the box. On the table. Then she was gone. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of the door closing. I waited until I saw her figure on the camera feed, walking down the long, dark driveway toward the county road. Then, and only then, did I let out the breath I had been holding. The house was silent. Just the wind and the hum of the refrigerator. I walked over to the table. There was a small cardboard box there. It was a shoebox, one of the ones she had saved from the demolition. I opened it. Inside were small things, a ceramic bird my grandmother kept on the sill, a stack of coasters, and a folded piece of yellowed paper. I unfolded the paper. It was in my grandmother's handwriting. It looked like a draft of a letter. Written years ago. To my girls. I worry about the cabin. I worry about the trust. Mr. Harrogate says the transfer was clean, but I remember what your grandfather said about the survey line and the old mining claim. If anyone ever digs too deep into the deed history, they might find out we never really— The sentence trailed off. It wasn't finished. We never really— What? I read the name again. Mr. Harrogate. I felt a cold prickle of dread that had nothing to do with Marissa or Graham. Graham had said he specialized in distressed assets. He had said he found Marissa because she had a property. What if Graham didn't want the house because of the equity? What if he wanted the house because he knew something about the title that I didn't? I looked at the notice of intent again. Stonefall Private Capital. I looked at the handwritten note. Old mining claim. I sat down in the dark, clutching the yellowed paper. I had fired the weapon that would destroy my relationship with my sister, thinking it would save the house. But as I stared at the note, I realized the house might not have been safe to begin with. The yellowed piece of paper lay on Evelyn Park's mahogany desk, looking fragile under the harsh fluorescent light of the office. I sat across from her, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm water. Watching her read, she did not read quickly. She traced every line with the tip of her pen, her brow furrowed in a deep, worrisome crease. "This is what Marissa left?" Evelyn asked, without looking up. "Yes," I said. "It was in a box of my grandmother's things. She said she saved it from the demolition." Evelyn finally set the pen down. She took off her reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with the ticking of the wall clock and the thumping of my own heart. "You need to understand something about land in this part of Colorado." Evelyn began. "It is old. The claims go back to the mining days. Papers get lost. Boundaries get drawn by trees that died 50 years ago." "What are you saying?" I asked. "My grandmother left me the cabin in her will. The probate closed 18 months ago. I have the deed. You have a deed," Evelyn corrected. "But a deed is only as good as the chain of title behind it. This note. Your grandmother mentions Harrogate Fiduciary Services. I have never heard of them." "You wouldn't have," Evelyn said. "They were a small asset management firm in Denver back in the 80s. They dissolved in the late 90s. But according to this note, your grandmother placed the cabin into a trust arrangement with them to protect it from your grandfather's creditors during a bad spell." And, Evelyn said, looking me in the eye, "I did a title search this morning while you were driving over. I can see the transfer into the trust in 1985, but I can't find the deed transferring it out." I felt the room tilt slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," Evelyn said, "that when your grandmother deeded the property to you in her will, she might not have legally held the title in her own name. She might have been deeding you property that technically still belonged to a defunct trust." I stared at the paper. It was a ghost story, a bureaucratic ghost story. "So I don't own the cabin?" I whispered. Evelyn held up a hand. "You have color of title. You have paid the taxes. You have occupied it. But strictly speaking, there is a procedural gap, a hole in the net. And if I found it, and your grandmother worried about it—" "Graham found it," I finished. Evelyn nodded grimly. "Stonefall Capital is not just a predatory lender. They are title sharks. They scour county records looking for these kinds of irregularities. Dormant trusts, clouded titles, heirship disputes. They find the weak spot, and then they find a way in." "He didn't target Marissa because she was a visionary," I said, the realization washing over me like ice water. "He targeted her because she was the weak link in a chain he wanted to break. He knew if he could get a lien on the property, any lien, he could force a foreclosure sale. And in a foreclosure, he could challenge my title, expose the trust issue, and buy the land for pennies on the dollar to clear the defect. It is a classic squeeze." Evelyn said, "He uses the mechanic's lien to force the issue into court. Once it is in court, he attacks your ownership. If the judge rules your deed is invalid because of the trust error, the property is in limbo. And guess who is standing there with a checkbook and a secured interest in the improvements?" I felt sick. I felt a betrayal so layered I couldn't breathe. Marissa had betrayed me, Graham had manipulated me, and now, even my grandmother, my safe harbor, the woman who raised me to be careful, had left me standing on a trapdoor she had forgotten to lock. I closed my eyes. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive away and never come back. Audrey? Evelyn's voice was sharp. I opened my eyes. "We are going to court," Evelyn said. "We have a hearing in 2 hours. We are going to argue for an emergency injunction to stop the lien filing." "How can we stop it if I don't own the house?" I asked. "Because right now, you are the record owner," Evelyn said firmly. "And right now, Graham Sutter is a fraudster who used a forged signature. We fight the battle in front of us. We deal with the trust later. Do not let him see you bleed." Audrey. The Pine Hollow Ridge County Court was a single-room affair in the basement of the municipal building. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The gallery was empty, save for a few locals waiting for traffic tickets. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Evelyn. My hands were folded in my lap. I was wearing my interview suit, navy blue, sharp lines. I had pulled my hair back tight. I looked like a project manager. I looked like I had a plan. The door opened, and Graham Sutter walked in. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by a woman who looked like she belonged in a high-rise office in Chicago, not a basement in the Rockies. She wore a black suit that cost more than my car, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked like a weapon. "That is Lena Voss," Evelyn whispered. "Voss Ketterman Advocacy. They are big. They handle commercial litigation for developers." Graham didn't look at me. He looked bored. He sat at the defendant's table and checked his watch. "All rise," the bailiff shouted. Judge Holloway entered. He was an older man with a face like a topographic map of the county. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. Wood versus Stonefall Private Capital and Woodland Hearth Living, LLC. Request for emergency restraining order and preliminary injunction. Evelyn stood up. "Your Honor," she began, her voice clear and steady. "We are here to prevent the defendants from filing a fraudulent lien against the property at 1089 Granite Loop. The underlying contract for the so-called debt was based on a forged signature, unauthorized work, and identity theft committed against my client, Audrey Wood." Judge Holloway looked over his glasses at the defense table. "Ms. Voss?" Lena Voss stood up. She didn't look at papers. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this is a simple contract dispute masquerading as a fraud case. The plaintiff's sister, Marissa Wood, has resided at the property, held keys, and acted as the primary agent for the renovation. She signed a valid engagement letter with my client. She signed a valid bridge loan agreement. The work was performed. The value was added. Now that the bill is due, the plaintiff is suffering from buyer's remorse and is attempting to use her family dynamics to void a commercial obligation." It was a lie, but it was a polished one. It sounded reasonable. Evelyn countered immediately. "Your Honor, Marissa Wood had no ownership interest in the property. She had no authority to encumber it. Ms. Voss didn't blink. She had apparent authority. Your Honor, she was the occupier. She presented herself as the decision-maker. In Colorado, a contractor is entitled to rely on the representations of the person in control of the job site. Summit Peak Renovations and Stonefall Capital acted in good faith. They deployed $75,000 in capital. To block their lien is to deny them their statutory right to security." The judge frowned. He looked at me. "Ms. Wood," he said, "please take the stand." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I walked to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Wood," the judge said, "did you know your sister was remodeling the kitchen?" "No, Your Honor. I was away for work." "Did you authorize the work?" "No, Your Honor." Ms. Voss stood up to cross-examine me. She walked toward the stand, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "Ms. Wood," she said, "you say you didn't authorize it, but when you returned home and found the work in progress, did you call the police immediately?" I hesitated. "No, why not?" Because it was my sister. I said, Ms. Voss smiled. So you allowed the contractor to stay? You allowed the materials to remain on site? I stopped the work. I said, I told them to leave. But you didn't file a report. Ms. Voss pressed, you didn't report the credit card usage as fraud until days later. You didn't allege forgery until you saw the bill. Isn't it true, Ms. Wood, that you were waiting to see if you liked the renovation before deciding whether to pay for it? No. I said, isn't it true that you are risk-averse and you let your sister manage this project to shield yourself from liability, only to turn on her when the financing fell through? She was twisting it. She was using Graham's narrative, the risk-averse Audrey, to paint me as a calculating opportunist. I looked at Graham. He was watching me with a faint, amused smile. He thought he had won. He thought I would crack. He thought I would scream or cry or get angry. I took a breath. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I said. My voice was quiet. The room went still. I didn't call the police because I love my sister. I didn't report the fraud immediately because I was trying to understand how the person I trusted most in the world could do this to me. I was trying to protect her. I was wrong to do that. I looked at Ms. Voss. I am not risk-averse. I am a victim of a crime. My kitchen is destroyed. My savings are compromised. My credit is frozen. And now, a company I have never met is trying to take my home because my sister was desperate and they were predatory. I am not trying to avoid a bill. I am trying to stop a theft. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just spoke the truth. Stripped of all the legal maneuvering, the courtroom was silent. Even the radiator seemed to stop hissing. Ms. Voss paused. She looked at her notes, then back at me. She had lost the rhythm of her attack. No further questions. She said stiffly, I stepped down. Judge Holloway shuffled his papers. He looked at Graham, then at me. The court finds that there is significant dispute regarding the validity of the underlying contract. He said, given the allegations of forgery and the lack of a deeded interest by the signatory, the court is granting the temporary restraining order. I let out a breath. The defendants are enjoined from filing any lien or encumbrance against the property for 14 days, pending a full evidentiary hearing. Graham's face didn't move, but his fingers tightened around his pen. However, the judge continued, raising a finger. This court is concerned about the title issues raised in the briefing. If the chain of title is indeed defective due to the trust issues mentioned by counsel, that is a matter for a quiet title action. This order stops the lien today. But Ms. Wood, you have a long road ahead of you to clear this up. Case recessed. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. I walked out of the courtroom into the cold afternoon air. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shaking. We had won. For 14 days. Evelyn put a hand on my shoulder. You did good. Audrey, that testimony, it was perfect. It was the truth. I said, Ms. Wood. I turned. Lena Voss was standing there, buttoning her coat. Graham was already walking toward a black town car waiting at the curb. He didn't look back. My client is willing to discuss a settlement. Lena said, if you drop the fraud affidavit, Stonefall might be willing to walk away from the labor costs. Tell your client, I said, my voice steady, that I don't settle with thieves. Lena Voss shrugged. He is not a thief. Ms. Wood, he is a businessman, and businessmen have long memories. She walked away. I watched the town car pull away. As it turned the corner, I saw a figure standing near the bus stop bench, shivering in the wind. It was Marissa. She was wearing the same coat she had left the cabin in. Her duffel bag was on the ground next to her. She looked small. She looked broken. I told Evelyn I would meet her at the car. I walked over to the bench. Marissa didn't look up until I was standing right in front of her. Her eyes were red and swollen. Did you win? She asked. Her voice was raspy. For now, I said. She nodded. Good. That is good. Why are you here? Marissa, I didn't have anywhere to go. She said, I missed the bus to Denver. I looked at her. I felt a pang of the old instinct, the need to fix it, to buy her a ticket, to give her a warm meal. But I remembered the court. I remembered Lena Voss saying she acted as the primary agent. "Marissa," I said, "I need to know one thing, and if you lie to me, I will never speak to you again." She looked up. "Did Graham tell you to use my identity?" Marissa looked down at her hands. They were trembling. "He didn't just tell me," she whispered. "He coached me." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. "What do you mean?" "He gave me a script," she said. "He sat with me in the coffee shop in Brookvale. He had a list of the security questions for Redwood Crest. He told me exactly what tone of voice to use. He said, 'Sound impatient, sound like a busy professional who is annoyed at the bank.' He practiced with me. Audrey. He made me rehearse until I sounded like you." I stared at her. It wasn't just opportunism, it was a drill. "And the signature?" I asked. "He traced it," she said. "He found an old birthday card you sent me. He put it on a light box and traced your signature onto the contract. Then he had me practice it until I could do it freehand. He said it was assuming the avatar. He made it sound like a game. It was a game to him, a game where I was the NPC and my house was the loot." "Why didn't you stop?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he promised me." She sobbed. "He promised me that once the loan went through, we would pay it all back. He said you would never know. He said I would be the hero who saved the family legacy." She looked at me, her face wet with tears. "I just wanted to be the hero. Audrey. Just once." I looked at my sister. I saw the tragedy of her. She was so hungry for validation that she had let a wolf into the fold because he told her she was a shepherd. "You aren't the hero," I said, "and you aren't the victim. You were the weapon." I reached into my purse. I pulled out 2 $20 bills. It was all the cash I had. "The next bus is in an hour," I said. I put the money on the bench next to her. "Audrey." She reached for my hand. I pulled back. "Don't," I said. "Just go." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might break. And I couldn't afford to break. I had a house to save. The cabin was silent when I returned. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. The notice from Rita Hensley was still taped to the front door, flapping in the wind. I walked inside. The air was cold. I had kept the thermostat low to save money. The smell of sawdust and drywall was still there, a lingering scent of the violation. I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I took off my court blazer and put on a heavy fleece. I pulled my hair into a ponytail. I went to the utility closet and got the broom. I started to clean. I swept the kitchen first. I swept up the sawdust, the drywall crumbs, the little bits of copper wire the electricians had dropped. I filled 3 trash bags. I wasn't renovating. I wasn't fixing. I was reclaiming. Every sweep of the broom felt like an exorcism. I was sweeping out Graham's ambition. I was sweeping out Marissa's lies. I was sweeping out the vision of the luxury rental. I moved to the cabinets, or what was left of them. I wiped down the shelves. I pulled out the bottom drawer of the built-in hutch in the dining room, the one piece of furniture the demo crew hadn't touched. I wanted to clean under it. I pulled the drawer all the way out. Something was taped to the underside of the drawer box. It was a piece of paper. I frowned. I peeled the tape back. It was a photocopy of the term sheet from Stonefall Capital. But this one was different. This one had handwriting in the margins. I carried it to the window to read it in the fading light. It was Graham's handwriting. I recognized the sharp, angular script from the administrative efficiency note he had passed to his lawyer in court. There were notes next to the clauses. Clause 4, default. Trigger date February 5th. Clause 7, possession. Immediate lock change. And at the bottom, a note scrawled in red ink. Contingency. If Audrey resists, proceed to Phase 2. Cloud the title via Harrogate defect. Offer settlement at 20% of value. My blood ran cold. He knew. He knew about the Harrogate Trust. He knew about the defect in the deed. He hadn't just stumbled upon it, it was his backup plan. Phase 2. He had anticipated I might fight back. He had anticipated the court case. He was counting on the fact that once the lien was blocked, the title fight would begin, and he knew that in a title fight, my grandmother's paperwork would fail. He intended to buy my house for 20 cents on the dollar after driving me into foreclosure. I looked at the note. I looked at the date. It was written before he even met Marissa. He had stalked the property first. He had found the weakness in the county records. Then he had found Marissa. Then he had executed the plan. I wasn't dealing with a lender. I was dealing with an assassin who used paperwork instead of bullets. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. I wasn't afraid. Fear is what you feel when you don't know what is coming. Now I knew. He wanted a war? He wanted to play phase 2? I looked at the empty kitchen. I looked at the dark woods outside. I walked to the table and picked up my phone. I dialed Caleb. "Hey," he answered. "I saw you get back. You okay?" "I found something." I said, "Caleb, I need to borrow your truck tomorrow." "What for?" "I need to go to Denver." I said, "I need to find the archives of Harrogate Fiduciary Services." There was a pause. "You are going on the offensive." I looked at the note in my hand. "He thinks I am risk-averse," I said. "He thinks I'm a project manager who follows the rules." And he forgot the first rule of project management. I said, "What is that?" "Identify the critical path." I said, "And clear the blockage." I hung up. I grabbed my keys and walked out to my car. I needed to drive. I needed to clear my head before the next battle. I drove to Caleb's house. But I didn't go in. I sat in the driveway, looking at the silhouette of the mountains against the starry sky. I picked up my phone and dialed Evelyn's voicemail. "Beep, Evelyn, it is Audrey. We won today. But they aren't done. I found a note. Graham knows about the Harrogate Trust. It was his plan all along. He is going to try to break the deed." I took a breath, watching the condensation from my breath fog the windshield. I am going to Denver tomorrow. I am going to find the original trustee. I don't care if I have to dig through 30 years of boxes. I am going to fix the title, and then I am going to bury Stonefall Capital. I hung up. I looked at the cabin up the hill. It was dark, wounded, and besieged, but it was still standing, and so was I. My life was split now. There was the before, the quiet project manager who wanted a safe renovation, and there was the after, the woman who would burn the world down to protect what was hers. I put the car in gear. Phase 2 had begun. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you felt the cold wind of Pine Hollow Ridge and the heat of the betrayal. I would love to know where you are listening from. Are you in a mountain cabin, a city apartment, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed Audrey's battle for her home, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice, retribution, and the strength it takes to fight back coming your way. Share your thoughts in English. I read every single one. Stay safe and check your deeds.